Open the gates, and the righteous nation will enter, keeper of faiths. Hello everybody, this is Gilgamesh, and today we are looking at Isaiah chapter 26. This is a lengthy chapter, and so I'm probably going to divide it into two videos here. When I look at this note from the Net Bible, it talks about the literary structure of chapter 26 is not entirely clear. The chapter begins with an eschatological song of praise and ends with a lament and a prophetic response in verses 16 through 21. It is not certain where the song of praise ends or how verses 7 through 15 fit into the structure. Verses 10 through 11a seem to lament the presence of evil, and verse 11b anticipates the arrival of judgment, so it is possible that 7 through 15 are a prelude to the lament and announcement that conclude the chapter. I don't know that it's really that complicated. A lot of Isaiah chapters, you must realize, are actually multiple poems that have been put together, and this one may be as well. But I don't know that I think that it's so completely clear that the beginning is completely independent of the end on this chapter. But I will admit that there is a definite shift in subject matter and maybe even tone by the end. And if it transitions, I say it transitions somewhere around verse 12 or 13. And so I have divided this up as verses 1 through 12 as one unit and 13 through 21 as a second unit. But I'm not entirely convinced how independent they really are of each other, and I could be persuaded either way as to which half verse 12 actually belongs on. But it seemed like a good stopping point to keep the video from getting too long. So let's take a look at it. This is part of the Apocalypse of Isaiah, which includes chapters 24 through 27. We're sort of in the middle of it here. Beginning in verse 1, we have the introductory line, "In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah." This designates the prophecy that is enunciated here as a song. It's the beginning of some sort of a celebratory, triumphalist message. And that's very obvious from the following lines. "We have a strong city. Salvation he sets, walls and bulwarks." Robert Alter described the Hebrew as being rather crabbed here, and I have to agree that sounds like a good definition of what the Hebrew is here. It's a little strange. We have this salvation he sets. The verb appears to read in a third-person singular active verb. Some would like to interpret that possibly as a passive verb, that salvation is set, but then we have this strange thing of walls and bulwarks afterwards, maybe as a positive phrase for what salvation is. Elsewhere in Isaiah, salvation will be the name of the walls and the ramparts of Jerusalem. And so that seems to be what's going on here. But nobody can really agree on what is the subject and what's the direct object in this line. So this is my take. And it almost lets the idea of salvation here be personified as the one that is setting up the walls and the bulwarks. But then in verse 2 it says, "Open the gates, and the righteous nation will enter, keeper of faiths." So immediately this line here saying that we should open the gates of this city, that the righteous nation can come flooding in, it reminds me of Psalm 24 verse 7, which says, "Lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be ye lifted up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in." In Psalm 24, these were temple gates, and those who would pass through them would seek the face of God, and they were required to meet certain worthiness standards. It seems that that is something of the same idea here, that these gates to the city of Zion are being opened up, and a righteous nation is going to come flooding into them, and it talks about them being keeper of faiths. Now, many translations would change this around to keepers of the faith. The problem with that is it kind of reverses what happens in the Hebrew here. In Hebrew, the word keeper is a singular word, and the word for faith is plural. Calling it keepers of the faith kind of implies this later idea of that they were defending some idea of the single true religion, which I don't think is the intent of this verse, but instead it seems to be keeping multiple covenants and obligations faithfully. That seems to be more the sense here, that this is the one who keeps all of their faiths, all of their obligations, that those are the ones that are entering into this special city, which we assume is the city of Zion. Then verse 3, things get a little harder. And intentions supported, you keep peace. For in you he trusts. Trust in the Lord forever and ever. For Yah, the Lord, is the rock of eternities. Interesting verse. It is very difficult to translate this in any meaningful way. Are we still talking about the people that are entering the gates? It's a little hard to make sense of, particularly this first line here, and intentions supported. That translation is pretty much a complete guess. It is 2 words long in the Hebrew, and no one can completely be sure what it means. The first word, translated as intention, usually means form, such as a form molded from clay. The other meaning of this word is a thought or a desire or intention of the heart, such as the intentions of his heart have been evil from his youth, statement in Genesis and all that. It often is talked about as the intention of the heart, our intentions being molded by us in our minds. And so this idea of going from molded clay to molded thoughts. The other word that's there might mean support, or it might not. It is a passive participle, and it means to lean on or to hold up. It's actually also a word that indicates a transfer of authority by leaning or supporting the hands on the head of another, such as what Moses did to Joshua to transfer his authority to him. He, using this verb, leaned his hands on his head and transferred that authority. Interestingly, the word that is translated as intention here comes from the word yatsar, and it is quite similar to the word for keep, which comes just a few words later, which is natsar. It's also nothing like the word for keeper, which is shomer, that we had in the last verse. So it's sometimes hard to see in the English what's happening in the Hebrew here. But it is also similar to the word for rock, which we will see in verse 4 here as well, with rock of eternities. Isaiah may be doing some type of wordplay here, connecting these words together, possibly using nuances and meanings that we no longer understand. This word keeper, natsar, comes from a word that means to set apart or protect. So we are saying here that an intention or a formation is supported. You keep or protect or set apart peace. Now, it says peace. Yeah, it just appears twice. And no, that's not exactly a normal thing. Some think it's a scribal error. Possibly. But it seems to be a theme in this section to repeat things. And it happens in too many places that I don't believe this is at all an error. I think this is intentional. And perhaps if this was a song, you can probably think of songs that do this same sort of thing, where a word they want to emphasize is just repeated, regardless of whether that makes any grammatical sense or not. And that may be what's happening here, is that we are just simply emphasizing the word. Another possibility is that the second piece may belong on the next line. You keep peace, for in you he trusts. Emphasizing that peace again, but explaining why he protects the peace, because we trust in him. That's another possibility, and you can divide it up either way in the Hebrew. Many translations, though, obscure this repetition by using something like perfect peace. And they're just trying to make it make flowing English. But this is the betrayal sometimes that translations have, is when you get the translation, it always looks very nice in the destination language, but it doesn't always reflect how hard the original language was to read, or how obscure some of the vocabulary or grammatical syntactic construction was in the original language. Then we have the word trust here. For in you he trusts, trust in the Lord. We have the word trust or trusts, slightly different verb forms, but the same word basically back to back here. So again, we have this idea of words right next to each other repeating. Likewise, I translated the forever and ever here, which is the Hebrew phrase adad. This is a common phrase in Hebrew, and it has a natural repetition to it, just like our English phrase forever and ever, which is why I chose to translate it that way. Adad is something that you'll see quite a lot, but perhaps it was chosen here for this section, particularly because of its repetitive nature. Then we also have right after that for Yah the Lord, and usually I translate the Tetragrammaton as the word Lord in all caps, as is tradition out of respect for the sacredness of the name. But here I went ahead and put it in its actual letters so that you can see what's happening here. We don't know why this occurs this way. It only happens this way a few times, but it has here the short name Yah along with the full Tetragrammaton right afterwards. And so this also is a repetition. And we don't know what function the shorter form really was used for. We don't have enough understanding of what differentiation that shorter form meant to them. But it does seem like this is fitting into this idea of repeated words. Some think that the longer Tetragrammaton was added for clarity later, that perhaps people had forgotten what the short form meant and that the longer form was added so that it wouldn't be confused with something else. I'm not very convinced by that argument. I think that that is very unlikely that they forgot what the meaning of the short form was. Then it has here this Rock of Eternities. This is a metaphor, a stock image in the Psalms. It represents God as a stronghold, and thus it fits nicely with the idea of the powerful ramparts. The word for eternity is olam. It is actually a plural here, olamim. So this could be translated as eternities, plural. It's a common word in Hebrew, and it's certainly not the only word that means eternity. It's not even the only word in this verse. But there are several terms in Hebrew that mean this idea of forever or eternity or from long time ago. And this is one of the very popular ones here, that he is this rock of eternities. So if this is still referring to those who enter in to the gate, we have the idea here that you, perhaps the Lord, is protecting peace, and he is doing it because in the Lord he trusts, meaning the person entering the gates trusts in the Lord. And then we have the admonition to trust in the Lord always, and then that the Lord is the eternal defense, the rock of eternities. So a very nice image there of Zion opening its gates and people flooding into it. Brings us to verse 5. For he has humbled the inhabitants of the high place, the lofty city. He lays her low. He lays her low to the ground. He throws her to the dust. She tramples her the foot, the feet of the poor, the steps of the needy. We have here more repeated phrases, and I adjusted my translation a bit to make sure that this repetition comes through in the English, even though it's a little bit more awkward than a lot of translations would like to have. I wanted to get across how repetitive this was. Now, after talking about the ideal city, which was probably Zion, the focus seems to turn to a contrasting wicked city. This seems an obvious parallel to Moab, who was in the cesspool in the last chapter, being trodden down with the straw. It seems to have a lot of that same imagery to it, that he is being humbled, these inhabitants of this high place, this lofty city, this city that was raised up. She's being brought low. He lays her low. We have this, the exact same word, repeated twice, much like peace was above. And so this, again, may be some type of poetic device, may be associated with this being set to music, that there was a repeated phrase in the music. It is interesting that although the words have the exact same grammatical form, they are actually spelled slightly differently, which just goes to show you that spelling was not standardized at all in the ancient world. He lays her low, and she is being trodden down by the foot. So she tramples her, the foot. The word foot is feminine, that's why she tramples. So the foot is what's doing the trampling here. She tramples her, the foot, the feet of the poor. So the word foot and its plural feet are right next to each other in the Hebrew, and that's what I wanted to bring out here, that we have this repetition again. The foot is trampling down this lofty city, and the steps, parallel to feet here, of the needy are what's trampling down the city. And this is an obvious counterpoint to the strong city with its strong ramparts that is standing forever, the city of Zion. This city is being trodden down, and it's being trodden down by the needy and the suffering, the poor. This is typical Isaiah prophecy on behalf of social justice here. He is very concerned about the poor and the marginalized in society. And this seems to be a symbol of the people of Israel, who perhaps might be seen as weak and helpless in the face of powerful nations, but are now triumphing over them and part of the force that is bringing them down. Then, keeping with this idea of footsteps and paths, we have verse 7 here. The path of the righteous is straight. He will make straight the way of the righteous. She will be leveled, the path of your justice. Now, I took the first line from verse 8 and put it with this one because I think it goes here more appropriately. We have here the words straight and he will make straight. These are very similar words in Hebrew, but they're not quite identical like some of the other repeated words that we've seen so far. The one is an adjective and the other is a verb. And so there's some significant differences there, but they are very obviously related and placed right next to each other. And given the rest of the stuff we've seen, that seems to be part of the theme here. And the she will be leveled refers to the path. Path is feminine. And we end it here with the path of your justice. So the idea is this highway, this straight and narrow way that we see referenced in Isaiah many times of the righteous returning to Zion. It's going to be made straight. It's going to be leveled for them to return with ease back to their beloved city. And then we have here, O Lord, we wait for you, to your name and to your remembrance, the desire of the soul. I will say that the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Great Isaiah Scroll, actually has to your law, to your Torah, instead of to your remembrance on the spot. It's interesting, but I just stuck with remembrance, which is what the traditional text has. But we have this idea that we are expecting the Lord, and we have his name and his remembrance, perhaps his law, that our soul desires. We have some ancient versions which suggest that this might be the desire of our soul, but the Hebrew doesn't actually have a pronoun on it in the traditional text here either. We then have another repetition here. We end this with the desire of the soul, and then the next line is, my soul yearns for you in the night. My spirit within me searches for you. And so we have here the idea of soul repeated twice, and it actually forms a little bit of a chiasm here with the idea of the desire, soul yearning. And so it forms a little bit of a chiasm, although it's not as strong of a chiasm as other chiasms. And so it's hard to really say that one's truly intentional. It's a bit of a weak model for one, but it does have this reversal in it that is definitely there. And the word for yearning and for desire is actually the same word in Hebrew. It's just in translation, it's different. But what follows is much more clearly a chiasm. For when your justice is in the land, righteousness they learn, the inhabitants of the world. The wicked are favored. He does not learn. Righteousness in the land, uprightness. It doesn't make the clearest English, but I was trying very hard to keep the word order in the Hebrew so you could see the chiasm here. We have the idea of justice, then we have the phrase in the land, and then we have righteousness, they learn, and then we have the inhabitants of the world, that the inhabitants of the world are going to learn righteousness when justice is present. Then, contrasting the inhabitants of the world, we have the wicked are favored. So this is the opposite of the inhabitants of the world, they're going to learn righteous. We have favoring the wicked, and then we have he does not learn, and then we have the word righteousness, then we have the phrase in the land, and then for some reason we have the word uprightness here to correspond to justice. But a nice little chiasm there that forms from this. The idea is when justice is present, people learn righteousness. When justice is absent, people do not learn righteousness. What begins to emerge here is an eschatological differentiation between the wicked and the righteous. This is followed up by another chiasm. And again, I've kept the word order here of the Hebrew. He deals corruptly, and he does not see. The majesty of the Lord. O Lord, your hand is lifted up. They do not envision, and they will be ashamed. So we have, again, some of our repetition here. We have, right in the middle of the chiasm, the word Lord repeated, and while the translation has the word the and the vocative o next to it, those are not present in the Hebrew. That's just added to make the English sound nice. In Hebrew, it's just the tetragrammaton, and it's repeated right next to itself, back to back. Now, it's such a common word, the tetragrammaton is, that I wouldn't mention it, except that it seems to be the theme of this chapter. But then also we have here, they do not envision. Now, there's a couple ways we could translate this. There is only one negation on that line. So the first part of it is definitely they do not envision, but the negation might be doing double duty for both verbs, which are essentially the same verb completely repeated. And so it may just be repeating that one word again, meaning to have it as a negation, covering both iterations of that verb, or you could read the second iteration of the verb as a positive. They do not envision, they will envision. I don't think that makes as much sense. I think it's just simply repeating it for emphasis on that word, like many of the other repetitions we have seen so far. They do not envision. And then we have here, they will be ashamed as a result of their corrupt dealings. Then we have, coming a little further here in verse 11, jealousy of people, anger of fire of your adversaries. You will consume them. Well, the only word that's really questionable in this is the word that is translated as anger. The idea of jealousy of the people, the God has often used this word for himself, that he is the jealous God. And this often has a very protective sense of his protecting his relationship with the people. This may be what he's saying here, as jealousy of the people may be about protecting his own people. And then what is he protecting them from? He's protecting them from the anger of fire of your adversaries, your being the Lord. Well, the word here that's in question somewhat is the word anger. The word in Hebrew is off. And there's basically three meanings to it. One meaning is that it could be a particle meaning also or moreover, or a couple of things like that. That's the general sense of it. But it also could be the word for nose. And from that also comes the word for anger, as a couple of languages have that feature as well, where nose and anger are related. But it seems that with it being followed by the word for fire, and anger and fire often go together, that it makes more sense to translate it here as anger. And so I have anger of fire of your adversaries. This fiery anger of your adversaries is what you're protecting the people from. I think that makes the most sense here for the translation. It's what strikes me as the most likely. In Hebrew, the form for you, second person, and the form for she are identical. And so this final line could actually be read either as you will consume them, meaning the Lord, or she will consume them, meaning fire or jealousy, or possibly both. They're both feminine nouns. Either translation is perfectly fine. They get consumed either way, and the one belongs to the other. So it doesn't make any real difference how you understand it. That is one of the interesting things of Hebrew, is you can never quite tell the you and she forms apart. And sometimes context isn't clear. And then we go to verse 12. O Lord, you will ordain peace for us. For indeed all our works have you done for us. We come back to the idea of peace here, and it says that he will ordain peace. The word here actually means to judge or to bring justice. So he's going to do some type of a judgment or bring some justice, and that's what will bring peace for us. And the final line is a little uncertain what it means exactly, but probably it's saying that for all of the things that we have worked hard for are because of the things that you've done for us, something along those lines. The idea may be that he is rewarding them for their actions and their works, which is a common theme in Isaiah as well. But that brings us to the end of the first section, and I'll go ahead and stop it here so that this doesn't get too long. I hope you've enjoyed it. If this type of content is interesting to you, please like and subscribe, and I'll be coming out with the second half of chapter 26 in the very near future. Thank you. Have a good day.